Hey everybody, so this is my video for 7-8, which is about adding mixed numbers, all right? And so what I've done here is I have the packet from in class on the board. This is from 7-8, and I have a couple of questions. I have a couple problems, number 7, number 8, number 11, and number 12. I'd like to go about maybe solving one or two of them, and hopefully kind of just go over a step-by-step process that maybe listening here might help you understand a little further, okay? So just to begin with, let's take a look at problem number 7 here. And let's take a look and see what we have. We know that these are mixed numbers because they have a whole part, a whole number, and also a fractional part, and they're put together. So I see my my whole numbers here are 3 and 3, and my fractional parts are 1/6 and my whole numbers here are 3 and 5, and my fractional parts are 1/6 and 2/3. And so I need to add all of those parts together. Now, when we're dealing with a mixed number, we can always add the whole numbers together and add the fractions together separately and then smush them together in the end, and that's a totally great way to go about solving these problems. So first things first is I like to deal with the fractions, okay? Let's deal with those fractions. And when I mean deal with them, I mean like, well, let's take a look at them. This one here is 1/6 and this one here is 2/3, and we can't add those because they don't have common denominators. So we need to find the common denominators between those two fractions. So if we take a look at it, 1/6, and I also have 2/3, and if I take a look at those denominators, 6 and 3, I know that I can find multiples of those numbers and figure out which one they have in common and what the least common denominator is. So if I go ahead and I make a list of the multiples of 3, I would get 3 and 6 and 9 and 12. And if I went and made a list of my multiples of 6, I would do 6 and I would do 12, and we would see right away that the first number we have in common would be a 6. And now, so obviously I see my 1/6. I don't need to do anything to that. I can just go ahead and move it down, and that becomes 1/6. But the 2/3 here, I need to turn that into sixths. So I need to multiply it by something to get sixths. And if I know, I say 3 times what is 6? Well, 3 times 2 is 6. So whatever I do to the bottom, I also do to my numerator. If I do it to the denominator, I do it to the numerator. What I'm doing then is multiplying it by just a 1. 2 over 2 is 1. And ultimately what we're making is an equivalent fraction, a fraction that is equal to this fraction here. And so 2 times 2 is 4. So we can say that 2/3 is equal to 4/6, okay? And so now what we're going to do, that was 4/6, is move that guy down into our equation here, drop him down into our equation as 2/3. And so now I have 1/6, not 2/3, Mr. Abbott, come back, 4/6 over here. 4/6, and now I can add those two together. I can say 1/6 plus 4/6 is going to equal 5/6, which works out well. Now, 5/6, that works out awesome, and what I can do is I can take that and I can now have my fractional part of this problem. The other part that I have on this problem is I have my whole numbers. I have 3 and I have 5, and I need to add those up. Well, 3 plus 5 is 8, and that's a pretty easy thing to do. And so I have 8, and then I also have my 5/6 that I'm adding in, and now I get a total sum of 8 and 5/6 on that problem, okay? Let me review real quick what I just did. I took a look at my initial problem here, I review in blue, and I realized that looking at my denominators, I had to change them. I had to change one of them in this case to make them equal so that they had common denominators. So I changed my 3 to make it into a 6. I did that over here by multiplying it by 2 over 2 to get 4/6. I then added 1/6 plus 4/6 to get 5/6. What I then did was I added my 3 plus my 5, my whole numbers here, and I got 8. And then I brought in that 5/6 and added it to my 8 for a sum of 8 and 5/6. Cool. So really, what the steps that we have on this are, number 1, deal with the fractions. You have to find a common denominator. Once you find that common denominator, then you can go about 2, which is adding the fractions. Once you've added those fractions up, you can add your whole number And step 4 would be ultimately that fraction. Does your fraction, and this is the question ultimately, is your fraction improper? If yes, then you need to convert that to a mixed number. And if no, you're good to go and you just add that straight into your fraction. Let's take a look at this next one and see if we can come up with one that has an improper fraction, okay? So number 11 here, we have 4 1/10 and we have 6 1/2. So I'm going to take those fractions. Let's deal with the fractions. I have 1/10 and I have 1/2, and I need to add those up, but I can't because the denominators are different. So let's do our multiples of these numbers. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, and I have 10 on that one, and I know that 10 is going to be my common denominator. It's when they share. Cool. So my 1/10, obviously I don't have to do anything with that. I can just put that down into my equation, 1/10 plus. Now I know that we're going to be dealing with tenths. That's what I need to turn my half into. So if I have 1/2, and I need to multiply it by something to become tenths. What do I multiply it by? 2 times what is 10? Well, we can count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2 times 5 equals 10. Whatever I do to my denominator, I need to do the numerator as well, because I'm just ultimately multiplying it by something that's equivalent to 1. So I'm not changing my half as far as the amount goes. I'm just changing the sizing of it. So 1/2, 2 times 5 is 10, and 1 times 5 is 5. And so my equivalent to this, so 1/2 equals 5/10. They're the same. Cool. So 1/10 plus my 5/10 here, I get 6/10. Awesome. So I dealt with my fraction. Step 2, add the whole numbers. So I'm going to take 4, I'm going to add it to 6. 4 plus 6 is 10. I'm dealing with that. I'm adding in my fraction of 6/10. I am good to go. Awesome. So then, let's go ahead and let's take a look. I was hoping to get one that had an improper fraction when we added up the fractional parts. I think if we do this next one, number 12, we're going to get that. I can show you that example, and we'll be all done. Okay? So let's take a look at number 12 here. Number 12 has 9 7/12 plus 4 3/4, and we're going to add those together. Step 1, deal with the fraction. So I have 7/12, and I need to add 3/4. Cool. Let's find the multiples of these numbers. If we can count by 4 to get to 12, we'll be good. So we have 4, we have 8, and then we have 12. So we can. Our multiples, our lowest common denominator, least common denominator is going to be 12. So we can just take the 7/12 and put that right into our equation, plus we know that our other one, our 3/4, we want to turn it into 12ths. So let's take our 3/4. We're going to multiply it by something to get 12ths. So 4 times what is 12? And we can count by 4s. 4, 8, 12. Cool. So times 3. Whatever we do to our denominator, we're also doing to the numerator. So 3 times 3 is 9. I get a product here of 9/12. Cool. So what I'm saying is 3/4 equals 9/12. They are equivalent. So I can take my 9/12 and I can put that into my equation here on the bottom. That's great. So now 7 plus 9. 7 plus 9 equals 16. And I have 16/12, which is an improper fraction. And it's improper because the numerator on top is larger than the denominator. And I want you to think in terms of something like a box of donuts. If you have a box of donuts that holds 12 donuts and you have 16 donuts, you have to deal somehow with those extra donuts that don't fit in the box. What you have is you have a problem. And when you have something like this, an improper fraction, we have a problem. We need to deal with this. So one of the easiest ways to deal with this is make a number bond. And we're going to break this up. 12/12 would be 1 whole. 12 donuts in a box that holds 12 donuts, we have 1 full box of donuts. I love donuts. 12/12. And over here then, how many does that leave us with? If I have 16 and I take 12 away, how many am I left with? I'm left with 4. So I'm left with 4/12. Cool. So I broke that apart. This 12/12, I can rename that as just 1. 12/12 equals 1. So then ultimately, the 16/12 leaves me with 1 4/12. Cool. So I added the fractions, and I got 1 4/12. That works. Now all we have to do is go about adding in our whole numbers. They're over here. I should have put that over here. I have 1 and 4/12. I have 9 plus 4. 9 plus 4 is 13. And I'm going to add that to my 1 and 4/12. Once again, add the whole numbers up. Do the same thing again. And I'm going to get 14 and 4/12. Now 14 and 4/12, that's an okay answer. It's not the perfect answer. It's not the best answer. But 14 and 4/12 is an okay answer. We can make that better. I'm going to do this right up here. 14 and 4/12. We can simplify the 4/12. There's a couple ways you can look at that. You could say to yourself, well, cool, I can cut those numbers in half. Those are both even numbers. And if you're left with even numbers, you can cut them in half. So 4, cut that in half, you would get 2. 12, cut that in half, you would get 6. Cool. But you can also do it again because they're both even numbers again. So I can cut those in half. I could say 2 cut in half is 1, 6 cut in half is 3, and I would get 1/3. So a better answer would be 14 and 1/3. Another way of looking at 4/12 would be to say that I could count by 4s, or I could divide both the top and the bottom by 4s. So I could count by 4s. 4 and 4, 8, 12 would be 1/3. So anyways, a couple different ways of looking at this. Let's just review quickly in blue, and I think hopefully spending a little time on this has helped you out. Originally with this problem, problem number 12, I'm going to make this a little thicker so it stands out a little more. I had 9 and 7/12 plus 3/4. I took the fractions here, 7/12 and 3/4, and I put them over here. I added them up. We decided that 12 was the lowest common denominator, or least common denominator. And so I put this one down in here, and we turned 3/4 into 9/12 by multiplying both the numerator and denominator by 3. We put that 9/12 down in here. So I had 7/12 plus the 9/12. I added the 7 to the 9 to get a sum of 16 16/12. That was an improper fraction because the top was bigger, the numerator was bigger than the denominator. And so I busted that out using a number bond. And so I have 12/12 over here, which equals 1. And I have 4/12 over here. And I added those two up to get 1 and 4/12, which I put down here into my problem. I then added the whole numbers. 9 plus 4 was 13. 13 plus that 1 and 4/12 gave me 14 and 4/12, which was a pretty good answer. But ultimately, we could divide both the top and bottom numerator and denominator by 2. They were both even numbers, which I did to get 2/6. And well, I could do it again. So I did it again to get 1/3. So my final answer, 14 and 1/3, is how you do it. Remember those steps. Step 1, deal with the fractions. Step 2, add the whole numbers. Step 3, add them together. If you have the improper fraction, you deal with that by breaking it out with a number bond. You're good to go. All right? I hope this helps. You're doing really great. Believe in yourself. Remember your growth mindset that if you can't do this, you can't do it yet. You just haven't had somebody explain it to you yet in a way that you understand. So keep trying. Don't be afraid to go find some other video. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody that you haven't talked to. Think outside the box. Try something differently. But believe in yourself. You can do this. All right. See ya.